So here it is. This is the unofficial OceanVeil and Hentai anime survey breakdown based on the first 50 respondents. First off, let's cover the age, gender, and nationality of the participants. 50%, half of them, are in the 25 to 34 range. We've also got representatives from 18 to 24, 35 to 44, and 45 plus. That is our range. The overwhelming majority of the respondents were male, although we do have some representing females and non-binary. As for nationality, this is quite an interesting one. So compiling, all of these responses together, what I was able to gather is that over half of the participants, 28 out of the 50 responses, are from the United States. Interestingly, the second largest respondents, accounting for 10% of respondents in the first 50, is from Portugal as well. So that is quite interesting. I allow people to just type in where they came from. I just noticed Puerto Rico is there, which would technically count as the United States, so technically 29. Someone said Central Europe. I don't know where exactly that would be, but, is one of those countries. And then the rest, a bit of representation from Canada, from Australia, from Peru, interestingly. So yes, this is our age, gender, and nationality of participants. So the other thing that I had to figure out as well was the familiarity and use of OceanVeil by respondents. Of the first 50 participants, you can see that the 38 out of the 50 actually were familiar, they'd heard of OceanVeil, whereas 12 respondents hadn't heard of it before. Of these 38 who had heard of OceanVeil, 26 of them had actually used OceanVeil before. And then when asked, they broke it down, and you can see that 12 of these respondents said weekly, 10 of them said rarely, 2 of them said daily, and 4 of them said monthly. The preferred genres, and a couple of the genres that kind of stood out, by far and away, the most popular genre that was mentioned was fantasy, followed on by romance, which makes sense, and then comedy. Other noteworthy mentions were, of course, Yuri, 6 responses, Vanilla, 5 responses, and Harem, 5 responses. I asked people their thoughts on OceanVeil, and some of the positives. So one of the positives, of course, mentioned was uncensored content. People like the fact that the content on OceanVeil is uncensored, so that's great. And then another big highlight was the English dubs. People really like the English dubs, but when it comes to the negatives, mentioned is poor subtitles. Now, I believe, if I'm correct from what I read in the survey responses, this isn't so much talking about the quality of the translation as it is talking about the technical aspects of this, the subtitles. Like, I believe people were using the term hard sub, like that, or CC, that, they're kind of like fixed in. So people would like to see that kind of improved in the future. Now, another thing mentioned, of course, is the high price. This is something that I'll tackle later on, but it is worth just mentioning at the moment that people do have kind of a negative attitude towards the current pricing. And finally, the limited catalog. It was very limited when it first came out. At this point, people still think that the catalog is quite limited. So, the importance of features. So, I asked people here, like, what features do you consider essential to a hentai streaming service? So the first 10 responses here are all options that I put in for them to respond to, and then the last 5 responses are ones that people typed in themselves. So we're predominantly going to be looking at the first 10 here. By far and away, the most essential thing, according to people who filled this out, is the uncensored content. But the other important things: large library of titles and high quality video. So yeah, I've heard a bit of drama recently with regards to the video quality on the website. And we can go over the large library of titles in a moment as well. So in terms of what payment options would people prefer? Tide is credit card, debit card, and PayPal. A few respondents actually did talk about cryptocurrency, potentially, with one respondent mentioning Apple Pay. And this, though above 3 methods, I took a look at. It's a big, long section talking about payment processors in India. So features mentioned. So people would like to be able to more easily switch between the dub and the sub version of a show, and, of course, the availability of an app. Technical issues. I asked them, when you used OceanVeil, did you come across any technical issues? And the ones that came up were video quality, overlay doesn't load on Mac OS Safari, search being weird, Unfortunately, they weren't any more specific than that, so I can't, that can't really elaborate. Not mirroring on TV in full screen mode, and slow loading on homepage when internet is slow. I think what they meant with that is that like the loading was unusual. I'm trying to remember how they described it. I think they were saying something like there's separate elements loaded in at different times, in a way that seemed very like kind of unusual. Obviously, it will load slowly if your internet is slow, but it just seemed to be a bit weird in this particular instance. Now, the true competitors. But I do think it's important because people do make a lot of comparisons between OceanVeil and these competitors. So the true competitors are the illegal streaming sites. Of the respondents in this survey, you can see that over half of them use illegal streaming sites for hentai. The important thing to figure out is why are people using them? And they gave me several reasons. So first off, the large libraries of content. Now, obviously, this is going to be problematic because, understandably, these illegal websites, they don't pay for the content. So that's going to be problematic. But people are making comparisons. They look at the large library on these illegal websites. They look at the library on OceanVeil. It's an unfair comparison, of course, but it's an unfortunate reality. Secondly, newer content. Obviously, people want to see the new content. And, the fact that OceanVeil isn't able to serve that, whereas these illegal websites can, that's a problem. Secondly, ease of access. So I believe what they mean by that is like quickly access that you don't need to log in. There's sometimes apps associated with them, which I don't quite understand how that works. So yes, being able to easily access them is a big part of it. Of course, there's the free price. People mention that quite frequently, actually, I believe, in the survey results. These illegal websites they offer these big libraries of content for free. And actually, this is probably the biggest reason. It's because often it's the only way to watch. Like, for instance, we were talking about the newer content there. Like, in terms of the newer content, like, unless you're going to, import, like, some Blu-rays from Japan or something, the only way you're going to be able to watch this content is through these illegal websites. And it's the same with a lot of, series over the years, particularly like, for instance, very old series. What do illegal sites do better? This was a question that I thought would be only fair to ask them. And what they offer is more content for free, no restriction on type of content. Now, this one, from what I'm aware, is people talking about some of the more problematic hentai. But this is something that they point out, that these illegal websites it doesn't matter to them what the content is, they are offering it. And people are obviously, if they're interested in that type of content, they're going to go seek it out there. SEO. Now, this one is actually very interesting that they bring it up, and it's something that I've noticed myself. If people are looking for hentai, on Google search or whatever, I never see OceanVeil pop up there. And that's something that needs to change. I think it's very important that OceanVeil is search engine optimized so that when people start going to look for, hentai content, that they find OceanVeil very quickly. That, it's at least on the first page. Because if it isn't on that first page, most people aren't going to even be aware that the service is, an option. No regional restrictions. Now, in general, I thought OceanVeil has done a pretty good job of not having regional restrictions. And then I noticed, I believe it was Nukitashi, like when I was doing some research for something, I clicked into it just to see some of the details, and it mentioned the fact that it wasn't available in my region. And honestly, up until the point that I clicked it, I wasn't aware of that. What a lot of services do is they just don't have that content appear if it's not available. So I know that can be tricky to deal with. The more you can communicate with people about what content is available in your region, that's better, because, if people are going to subscribe to the service and they find that, the series they were interested in isn't available to them, that's going to leave a negative impression. Who are these competitors that must be bested? So I asked them, if they use illegal streaming sites, which ones do they use for hentai? These competitors exist, and they must be bested. So, the ones that were mentioned in particular were Hanime.tv, Hentai Haven, and N Hentai. These were the three websites I believe were mentioned the most. As it says right here, like it or not, these services must be competed with and should be studied to see what features are absent from OceanVeil, what can be added to OceanVeil, and this is probably the most important part, what can be done better than them. Because how do you overcome piracy? This is an issue that I've actually seen in the past, a couple of different markets. In particular, the one that comes to mind was an interview where CD Projekt was talking about releasing games in Poland, and the fact that at the time when they started, there was a big piracy issue in Poland with regards to these PC games. And so eventually CD Projekt managed to overcome it, and the reason they did that was because they offered better service than these illegal competitors. So people will be drawn to that. So another thing that's, important to talk about, of course, is how important is it that you're supporting the creators. And I actually have some personal notes to mention here, but first off, let's take a look at it. How important is it to you that the hentai content you watch is legally obtained and creators are fairly compensated, with 1 being not important and 5 being very important? The most popular result was 5. So a lot of people who are filling out the survey think it's very important to fairly compensate these creators. There's quite a few people that are ambivalent to it, and there was even a couple of people who chose 1 where it wasn't important at all that they be fairly compensated, which I thought was surprisingly brazen, but, honest results is important in this stuff, and I'm thankful that they were honest about this fact. There are some that don't care. There's actually quite a few who don't care. And so for these people, they're not seeing supporting the creators as a big reason to support OceanVeil. For these people, they're probably comparing it to these illegal websites and judging it based off of that. Now, the personal note that I wanted to mention was that I didn't really talk to many of these people who filled out this survey. Most of them were completely anonymous, but there was a couple that I did actually talk to, and something that I thought was very strange was that these people that I talked to, I believe there was about 3 of them, all were confident that subscribing to the service wouldn't make any difference to the hentai industry. And I thought that was strange, because one of the reasons I want OceanVeil to thrive is because I want to see the hentai industry improve. I want to see, bigger budgets, more releases, and the only way that that's going to happen is if money is injected into it. But there's quite a few people, at least that I talked to, that believe that, subscribing to a service won't make any difference. So I think that's something that, should be kind of highlighted in marketing somehow. Another thing that I thought was important to take a look at, some of the favorite hentai titles that respondents mentioned. And we got quite a variety of them. I believe the specific question also mentioned genres. There was a bunch of them that just mentioned genres, but there are also quite a few mentions of hentai titles. And I took a look at ones that kind of were mentioned multiple times. So the one that was mentioned was My Mother. Now, this one is Thai in origin, but is very clearly inspired by hentai. Like, if you look at it, it looks pretty much like a hentai. The only thing is that they're speaking Thai in it, and it's uncensored. But I believe this might be worth making an exception, just because clearly there's people interested in that content. I believe I've even seen it mentioned on Discord myself. After that is a series called Rants. I remember hearing actually Rants mentioned on Trash Taste. Euphoria was mentioned. Now, Euphoria, from what I'm aware, is quite an infamous one. I haven't seen it myself. I did actually play a visual novel from the creators, and I was not pleased with it. But the fact is, Euphoria is one that's mentioned all the time. Some people really love it, some people really hate it. Then this one, Eroge Hmo game mo Kaihatsu Zanmai. I believe one person only mentioned the word eroge, one about like girls making eroge. And I believe this is the one they mentioned, although there is the possibility that they were actually talking about this other one. Eroge de Subite, I believe. So it's possible they were talking about that one. But someone else actually did mention this one by name, so I just decided to just put it in here together. And finally, one that was mentioned was Dragon Pink, which I believe people mentioned was very comedic and very funny. So those are the hentai titles that were mentioned by multiple respondents. What factors are most important for subscribing. Again, it's a similar thing to before. I gave people options, I believe this time 8, and I also gave them the option to actually like include their own result as well. The number one issue is price. So we can see that price is actually a very important factor in their decision of whether or not to subscribe. Along with that is, of course, the content library and the uncensored content. The issue of price. So I asked people, assuming that paying more leads to a higher quality service, how much would you be willing to pay per month for a legal hentai streaming service with a large library of uncensored content? The most popular results was a tie between $5 to $10 and $10 to $15. Now, there's a couple of people that were willing to pay extra. I believe there was even one person who was willing to pay more than $20. Outside of the top 2, which are tied, the biggest option is less than $5. I asked them as well, would you be interested in a free version of the service with limited content or ads? 3/5 of them said yes, with a further 24% saying maybe, and only 16% flat out saying no. It's fair to say that price is a consistent issue. I asked people, what would make you subscribe? And they said a large and diverse content library. When they mentioned diverse, actually, some people mentioned, wide variety of genres, but some people also mentioned, actually the time periods, as in, the ones that were made from the 80s, from the 90s, brand new content, all that kind of stuff. High quality video and subtitles. So yes, of course, that would be very important. Affordable pricing, user-friendly website and features. Another feature that people want is language options and support. Asking them, do you prefer hentai with English dubs or with subtitles? And, interestingly, in contrast to the whole sub versus dub debate, where, it seems that everyone is thinking that subtitles are better than English dubs, you can actually see that people here, actually, there's a plurality of favoring English dubs. There's also quite a few people who favor subtitles, and then 24% of people said no preference. So that was worth noting. So the most preferred subtitle languages. So I asked them, which languages would you like to see subtitles in? And obviously, number 1 is English. Japanese was followed. Spanish and Portuguese were also big after that. Thank you.